On Christmas Eve, the warm glow of holiday lights couldn't mask the heartbreak as Isabel walked out the door, leaving Thomas alone with their 4 young daughters. The laughter that once filled the house was replaced by tears and silence. Years later, fate brought her back, but this time she wasn't prepared for what she saw. The family she abandoned had flourished in ways she never imagined, and the sight of their strength, unity, and unshakable love left her utterly speechless. But before diving deeper into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next one. The warm glow of the Christmas tree lights danced across the living room, casting a magical shimmer on the walls. The smell of freshly baked gingerbread mingled with the faint aroma of pine needles, filling the air with a festive warmth. Laughter rang out as Thomas tried to balance an absurdly tall stack of brightly wrapped presents, wobbling precariously as Isabel sat nearby, her hand resting on her rounded belly, chuckling at her husband's antics. "You're impossible," Isabel teased, her brown eyes sparkling as she threw her head back, her laughter infectious. "Impossible to resist, you mean?" Thomas countered with a wink, grinning as he managed to steady the pile and deposit it near the tree. "See? Expert-level balance." Expert standing upright wasn't very expert, he thought. His mouth dropped open. Sophie, the eldest, at 5, giggled as she carefully hung another ornament on the tree, her little hands steady with concentration. "Daddy, you're so silly," she said, turning to admire her handiwork. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of excitement and pride as she adjusted the placement of her ornament, a glittering star she had made in preschool the week before. "Look at me, I'm a reindeer," squealed 3-year-old CLA, dashing around the room with red tinsel wrapped around her head. She galloped in circles, her laughter a high-pitched melody as Sophie tried to catch her. "Girls, careful," Isabel warned, her voice gentle but firm. "We don't want to break anything, especially not your daddy." "Oh, I'm fine," Thomas assured her dramatically, collapsing onto the couch as if exhausted. "I'll just rest here while you handle the chaos." The girls squealed in mock protest, piling onto their father in a flurry of giggles and hugs. Isabel watched them, her hand absent-mindedly stroking her belly as a soft smile spread across her face. The baby kicked gently, as if joining in the moment. Isabel closed her eyes for a brief second, overwhelmed by the sheer joy and completeness of their family. "Mommy, Daddy, look what we made," Sophie and CLA shouted in unison, holding up colorful drawings of reindeer and snowmen. The crayon marks were uneven, but the joy in their eyes made them masterpieces. "These are amazing," Isabel said, beaming as she leaned forward to examine the art. "You're both such talented artists." "Talented and fast," Thomas added, pulling them both close and peppering their cheeks with kisses until they squirmed away, giggling uncontrollably. The family gathered on the sofa, Isabel nestled between Thomas and the girls, their legs tangled in a heap of cozy chaos. A holiday movie played softly in the background, but no one seemed to be paying much attention to it. The warmth of the room, the love they shared, was all-consuming. "What do you think the baby will like best about Christmas?" Sophie asked suddenly, looking up at her mother with wide, curious eyes. "I think she'll love the lights," Isabel replied, placing her hand over Sophie's. "Just like you did when you were a baby. You used to stare at the tree for hours, completely mesmerized." Another slide off the large screen. "We're closing up our count of possible future trade-offs." Serology felt similar. Both were expenditures that produced results. Thomas laughed, reaching over to steal a bite from CLA's cookie. "I think she'll like being part of the most fun, loving, slightly crazy family in the world." The girls cheered at this, their innocent joy echoing through the room. Isabel leaned her head against Thomas's shoulder, her heart full to the brim. "This is perfect," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the flurry of giggles and chatter. Thomas turned to her, his expression softening. "It is," he agreed, kissing her temple. "And it's only going to get better, I promise." The scene was one of pure magic. a snapshot of a family brimming with love and hope. The tree glowed warmly, its ornaments reflecting the joy in the room. The fireplace crackled softly, its light adding to the golden hue that bathed the space. The night was alive with laughter and love, and for a moment, it felt as though nothing could ever break the perfection of their little world. But perfection, as it turned out, was fragile. 5 years later, the living room looked starkly different. The Christmas tree still stood, its lights twinkling faintly, but there was an emptiness in the air that no amount of decorations could fill. The room was too quiet, save for the occasional rustle of paper as the girls half-heartedly wrapped presents or adjusted ornaments. Thomas stood in the kitchen, staring into the sauce he was stirring as if it might hold the answers to his swirling thoughts. The smells of cinnamon and turkey were the same, but they carried a heavy weight now. The laughter that had once filled the air was replaced with hushed whispers and stolen glances. "Daddy, has Mommy arrived yet?" Marie's small voice broke the silence, filled with a mixture of innocence and longing. Thomas froze for a second, forcing himself to smile as he turned to her. "She must be on her way, sweetheart," he said softly, though his chest tightened painfully at the lie. Where was Isabel? The question echoed in his mind, pulling him into a memory of that perfect Christmas. He could almost hear her laugh, see her glowing with joy as she held their daughters close. The memory was bittersweet now, a painful reminder of everything he had lost. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice brought him back to the present. At 10, she was no longer the carefree little girl decorating ornaments. Her face was shadowed with concern, her eyes searching his for reassurance. "It's fine," he lied, his voice strained. "Let's finish getting dinner ready." But nothing about this Christmas felt ready. The promises of that joyful past seemed distant now, fractured by betrayal and the weight of single parenthood. Thomas glanced at his daughters, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and unease, and made a silent vow. Whatever it took, he would hold their world together. For them. Always for them. The alarm clock buzzed incessantly, pulling Thomas from a restless sleep. His eyes felt heavy, weighted with exhaustion, but he forced himself to sit up. The other side of the bed, once Isabel's, was empty, a void that still echoed the loss. The house was already stirring with faint sounds of footsteps. He glanced at the clock, 5:45 a.m. A wave of anxiety hit as he mentally listed everything he needed to do before the day even began. Get breakfast ready, pack lunches, dress the girls, ensure Sophie didn't miss the bus, and somehow get to work on time. In the kitchen, Sophie, now 10, was rummaging through the fridge. "Morning, sweetheart," Thomas greeted, his voice strained but warm. Sophie didn't look up. "We're out of juice again," she said tersely, her tone sharper than Thomas remembered her ever using before Isabel left. "I'll grab some after work," he offered, trying to keep the peace. "You always say that," Sophie snapped, slamming the fridge door shut. Her face, once filled with carefree laughter, was now shadowed with anger and a maturity far beyond her years. Thomas sighed, guilt gnawing at him. "Sophie," he started gently, "I'm doing my best." "Your best isn't enough," she shot back, before storming out of the kitchen. The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. He leaned against the counter, letting the quiet hum of the refrigerator fill the silence. He wasn't enough. Not for Sophie. Not for any of them. Meanwhile, CLA sat at the dining table, quietly nibbling on a piece of toast. At 8, she had grown unnaturally silent since Isabel left. Her usual chatter and playful antics had been replaced with an almost eerie calm. "Morning, Princess," Thomas said, ruffling her hair as he set down a plate of eggs. CLA nodded but didn't look up. She carefully pushed her food around her plate, her focus too intense for such a simple task. "You okay?" Thomas asked, sitting down across from her. "I'm fine, Daddy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but the way she clutched her fork, her knuckles white, told another story. Clay was trying, too hard, to be the perfect child, as if her quiet compliance could somehow fix the broken pieces of their family. A loud cry broke the silence. Thomas rushed to Anne's room, where the 6-year-old sat on her bed, tears streaming down her round cheeks. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Thomas asked, sitting beside her. "I dreamed Mommy was here," Anne sobbed, throwing herself into his arms. "But then she left again. Why did she leave, Daddy? Was it because of me?" Thomas's heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "Oh, Anne, no," he whispered, holding her close. "It wasn't because of you. Mommy loves you very much. She's just far away right now." Anne's small body trembled in his arms. "But what if she never comes back?" she asked, her voice cracking. Thomas didn't have an answer. He simply stroked her hair and whispered reassurances, though he wasn't sure he believed them himself. Downstairs, Marie, only 4, sat at the kitchen table, clutching her teddy bear. She swung her legs happily, seemingly unaware of the heavy tension in the house. "Daddy, is Mommy coming home today?" she asked, her blue eyes wide with hope. Thomas froze, the question stabbing him anew every morning. "I don't know, sweetheart," he replied softly, forcing a smile. "But we're going to have a great day together, okay?" Marie nodded, her faith unshaken. She hummed a Christmas carol as she sipped her milk, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around her. But by the time Thomas got all 4 girls out the door and into the car, he was already drained. Dropping them off was a gauntlet of emotions. Marie clung to him, begging not to go to preschool. Anne sniffled quietly in the back seat. CLA gave a small, forced smile before disappearing into her school. And Sophie jumped out of the car without a word, slamming the door behind her. At work, Thomas struggled to focus. His boss's voice blurred into the background during meetings as his mind wandered back to the girls. Were they okay? Would they ever truly be okay? That evening, he returned home to a chaotic scene. Toys strewn across the living room, dishes piled in the sink, and a pile of laundry threatening to spill onto the floor. Sophie sat at the table, scowling at her homework. Anne was crying over a broken crayon, and Marie was chasing the cat with a spoon. Ella quietly folded clothes in the corner, her small hands working methodically. Thomas dropped his briefcase and ran a hand through his hair. He felt like a failure in every sense of the word. It was then that the doorbell rang. Thomas opened it to find Mrs. Thompson, their elderly neighbor, holding a covered dish. "Good evening, Thomas," she said warmly. "I thought you and the girls might like some shepherd's pie." Thomas stared at her, overwhelmed by this simple act of kindness. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you," he stammered, his voice choked. Mrs. Thompson stepped inside, surveying the chaos with a knowing smile. "You're doing a good job, dear," she said softly. "Don't be too hard on yourself." That night, as the girls devoured the shepherd's pie and even managed to laugh at one of Marie's jokes, Tomas felt a flicker of hope. After dinner, he found a crumpled piece of paper on the coffee table. It was a drawing by Marie, a clumsy stick figure surrounded by 4 smaller ones, all smiling. Scrawled beneath it in uneven letters were the words, "Best Daddy in the World." Thomas felt tears prick his eyes. He wasn't perfect, and he couldn't fill the void Isabel had left. But for his daughters, he would keep trying. With renewed determination, he folded a load of laundry and began tidying the living room. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, but tonight, he let himself believe they could get through it. Together. The Saturday afternoon sun bathed the Durand house in a warm glow, though inside, the atmosphere felt far from light. Thomas was kneeling on the living room floor, helping Murray complete a jigsaw puzzle. The others were scattered throughout the house, Sophie reading in her room, CLA practicing her handwriting at the kitchen table, and Anne idly coloring on the couch. The knock on the door was so unexpected that Thomas froze, the puzzle piece slipping from his fingers. Marie looked up, her wide blue eyes curious. "Daddy, who is it?" she asked. You'd almost think that he wanted to stay on the walk home, yet the sky was open and the moon was bright. He hadn't been expecting anyone. His heart quickened as he approached the door. a mix of instinctual protectiveness and unease creeping over him. He swung the door open and froze. Isabel stood there, her hands trembling as they clutched the strap of her bag. Her hair was shorter and her face bore lines of exhaustion and regret, but her familiar brown eyes, shimmering with tears, left no doubt. It was her. "Thomas," she said softly, her voice cracking. For a moment, Thomas couldn't move. His mind raced, a cacophony of emotions clashing within him: anger, shock, confusion, and, buried deep, a flicker of something he refused to name: relief. "Isabel," he managed, his voice flat, carefully controlled. "What are you doing here?" I've come back," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, I need to talk to you." The sound of her voice drew Sophie to the top of the stairs. She stared at Isabel, her face a mask of disbelief that quickly twisted into anger. "No," Sophie said sharply, descending the stairs 2 at a time. "You don't get to just show up here like nothing happened." "Sophie," Thomas said firmly, stepping in front of her, "go back upstairs." "But," she began, her eyes flashing with fury. "Now," Thomas said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sophie glared at Isabel, her fists clenched, before storming back up the stairs. Her footsteps pounded against the floor, followed by the sharp slam of her bedroom door. Marie, still clutching her puzzle piece, tugged on Thomas's sleeve. "Is that Mommy?" she asked softly, her voice filled with innocent hope. Thomas's heart clenched. "Go play with Anne, sweetheart," he said gently. "I'll explain later." When the girls had retreated, Thomas stepped aside. "Come in." The living room felt stifling as Isabel sat on the edge of the couch, her hands twisting nervously. Thomas stood across from her, his arms crossed, his stance protective and unyielding. "Cut off." "Why now?" he asked, his voice tight. "It's been 2 years, Isabel. 2 years without a word." "I know," Isabel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." Thomas's jaw clenched. "Do you think an apology fixes this? Do you have any idea what we've been through?" "I do," she said, her tears now falling freely. "Thomas, I was drowning. After Marie was born, I felt like I was suffocating. I didn't know how to ask for help. I was so ashamed. And then John, he made me believe there was an escape." "John," Thomas repeated bitterly. "The man you left us for." Isabel nodded, swallowing hard. "He wasn't who I thought he was. He manipulated me, made me feel like I was worthless without him. And then, he left me. 6 months ago, he disappeared. It took me that long to find the strength and the resources to come back." Thomas stared at her, his anger giving way to something more complex. He saw the pain etched into her features, the way her shoulders sagged under the weight of her regret. But forgiveness wasn't that simple. "You broke their hearts," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "You broke me. How do you expect to fix that?" "I don't expect it to be easy," Isabel admitted. "I don't even expect you to forgive me. I want to try. For them, for us." Their tense exchange was interrupted by a soft voice from the doorway. "Mommy?" Anne stood there, her coloring book clutched to her chest. She looked at Isabel with a mixture of hope and fear, her small body trembling. "Oh, Isabel," Isabel whispered, rising from the couch. She took a tentative step forward, but Anne didn't move. "Are you gonna leave again?" Anne asked, her voice breaking. Isabel's tears fell harder. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I promise. I'm here to stay," she said. Thomas watched the exchange, his heart heavy. He didn't know if he believed Isabel's promise. He didn't know if he wanted to. Later that evening, after Isabel had left, the girls gathered in the living room. Sophie sat with her arms crossed, her face set in defiance. CLA was quiet, her expression unreadable, Anne sat close to Thomas, holding his hand, while Marie played with her teddy bear, seemingly oblivious to the tension. "Is she back?" Sophie demanded. "She abandoned us. She doesn't get to just come back and pretend everything's fine." "She says she wants to make things right," Thomas said carefully. "She's willing to do whatever it takes to prove it." Magnus's eyes were hard, like they were too thick. "And what about us?" Sophie shot back. "What if we don't want her here?" "That's up to you," Thomas said. "But we're going to take this slow. Therapy. Supervised visits. No decisions until we're all ready." CLA looked up then, her voice hesitant. "Do you think she really means it?" Thomas sighed, looking at each of his daughters. "I don't know. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out." Question? Later that night, as Thomas tucked Marie into bed, she handed him a piece of paper. "Look, Daddy," she said proudly, "I made this for you." Marie looked over her speech. There was another drawing, this time of their family, including Isabel. Below it, in clumsy letters, were the words, "Best Daddy in the World." The drawing included Thomas stared at the drawing, his throat tight. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. He would do whatever it took to protect his daughters' hearts, even if it meant giving Isabel a chance. For them, he would try. The beige walls of Dr. Lauren's office were adorned with framed nature prints and shelves lined with books. A soft, neutral rug covered the floor, and the seating area was arranged in a small circle of chairs and a couch. It was meant to be a safe, welcoming space, but for the Durand family, the air felt charged with tension. Thomas sat stiffly in one of the chairs, his hands clasped tightly together. Isabel sat across from him, her posture hesitant and uncertain, as though she were bracing for impact. Between them sat the girls. Sophie, her arms crossed and face unreadable. CLA, her gaze fixed on the floor. Anne, clutching a stuffed bunny for comfort, and Marie humming softly as she played with the toy. Dr. Lauren smiled gently at the group. "Welcome, everyone. I know this feels strange and maybe even uncomfortable, but this is a space for honesty. There's no judgment here, only understanding. Let's start with something simple. How does everyone feel about being here today?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sophie was the first to speak, her voice sharp. "How do I feel? I feel like this is a waste of time. Why should we even bother?" Thomas inhaled deeply, ready to respond, but Dr. Lauren gestured for him to wait. "Sophie," she said calmly, "can you tell us more about why you feel that way?" Sophie's eyes darted to Isabel, her anger breaking through. "We're done," she said, "because she doesn't care about us. If she did, she wouldn't have left. She abandoned us, and now she thinks she can just come back and say sorry? It's not that easy." Isabel flinched, her eyes filling with tears. "Sophie," she said softly, "I know I hurt you." "Don't," Sophie interrupted, her voice trembling. "Don't act like you understand what it was like for me. I had to take care of everyone while you were off living your new life. I was the one who had to grow up." The room fell silent again, the weight of Sophie's words hanging heavily in the air. Isabel wiped at her tears but said nothing, and Thomas leaned forward, his voice steady but soft. "Sophie, I didn't realize how much you were carrying. I should have seen it. I'm so sorry." Sophie's face softened for a moment, but she quickly looked away, blinking back tears. Over the next few sessions, more emotions began to surface. CLA, always the quiet one, hesitated to speak until Dr. Lauren asked her directly, "CLA, how do you feel about what's happening in your family right now, Dr. Lauren? That someone cares about me?" CLA shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. I just want everyone to be happy again," she whispered. "I thought if I was good enough, if I didn't cause any trouble, maybe things would get better." But it didn't work. "Colette," Isabel said, her voice breaking, "none of this was your fault. You're an amazing daughter, and you don't have to be perfect for us to love you." CLA nodded slightly, but her tears betrayed the depth of her struggle. Anne was next, Her small voice trembled as she admitted, "I'm scared. What if Mommy leaves again? I don't want to wake up one day and find her gone." Thomas reached for Anne's hand, squeezing it tightly. "I understand why you feel that way, sweetheart," he said. "And I promise, no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Isabel leaned forward, her voice raw with emotion. "Anne, I'm so sorry I made you feel like that. I'm going to do everything I can to show you I'm here to stay." Marie, ever the optimist, simply said, "I'm happy Mommy's back. Now we can all be together again." The innocence in her words was both a balm and a knife, a reminder of what had been lost and what still might be regained. Gradually, small moments of healing began to emerge. One evening, as the family sat around the dining table, Thomas suggested decorating a Christmas tree together. At first, Sophie resisted, muttering, "What's the point?" But as the girls pulled out the box of ornaments, her curiosity got the better of her. Clay carefully hung her favorite glass star, Anne giggled as she placed a lopsided angel near the top, and Marie insisted on putting her teddy bear on one of the branches. Isabel, watching quietly from the side, hesitated before picking up a delicate snowflake ornament. "Do you remember this one?" she asked softly, holding it up. "Sophie, you made this when you were 5. Sophie glanced at it, her expression softening despite herself. "It looks terrible," she said, but there was a faint smile on her lips. "It's perfect," Isabel replied, placing it gently on the tree. Throughout the process, Mrs. Thompson became an unwavering pillar of support. She often stopped by with baked goods or simply sat with Thomas in the evenings, offering quiet words of wisdom. "Forgiveness isn't about letting someone off the hook," she told him one night. "It's about letting yourself heal." "The girls will follow your lead, Thomas. Show them what it means to be strong in love." Emma, too, played an essential role. At work, she took on extra tasks to lighten Thomas's load, and at home, she became a trusted confidant. One evening, after an especially emotional therapy session, Emma brought over dinner and sat with Thomas on the porch. "You're doing an incredible job," she said. "I know it feels impossible sometimes, but your girls see how hard you're fighting for them. That's what matters." Her words were a salve to his weary soul, and for the first time in years, Thomas felt like he wasn't alone in the struggle. As the weeks passed, the Duran family began to rediscover the rhythm of togetherness. The therapy sessions remained challenging, but the breakthroughs, however small, were beginning to outweigh the setbacks. Sophie allowed herself to laugh at one of Isabel's jokes. CLA asked her mother to help with a school project. Anne climbed into Isabel's lap for a story. Marie proudly declared that they were the best family ever. Each moment, fragile yet profound, was a step forward. Thomas watched it all unfold with cautious hope. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he believed they might just find a way to heal together. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as CLA pedaled her bike down the quiet street. Her helmet gleamed in the light, and a wide smile stretched across her face as she practiced her new tricks. She had been working tirelessly on them, eager to show off her skills at the park. The air was crisp, filled with the distant hum of neighborhood chatter. Then, it happened. The screech of tires on pavement. A dull thud. The sound of metal hitting the ground. Thomas's phone buzzed on his desk just as he was finishing a report at work. He almost ignored it, but something compelled him to glance at the screen. The caller ID displayed the name of CLA school, and a sharp pang of worry struck his chest. "Hello?" he answered, quickly. "Mr. Durand," a voice on the other end said, tense and urgent. "This is Principal Jennings. There's been an accident. CLA was hit by a car while riding her bike. She's on her way to the hospital now." The world seemed to tilt as Thomas gripped the edge of his desk. Is she okay?" His voice cracked. "She's in stable condition, but she sustained serious injuries. You should head to the hospital immediately." Thomas arrived at the emergency room in a blur of panic and adrenaline. Isabel was already there, pacing near the waiting room, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Thomas," she choked, rushing toward him. "She's in surgery. They said she has a head injury and multiple fractures." Her voice broke, and she clutched at his arm for support. Thomas nodded stiffly, his jaw clenched. His emotions churned, fear, helplessness, and an unexpected flicker of gratitude that Isabel was there. "Where are the girls?" he asked, trying to ground himself in practicalities. "Mrs. Thompson is with them," Isabel replied, wiping her eyes. "She came over the moment I called." They sat in agonizing silence, the sterile smell of the hospital and the muffled beeps of machines adding to the oppressive weight of the moment. Hours later, a surgeon emerged, pulling down his mask. "Mr. and Mrs. Durand?" Both stood immediately. "The surgery went well. Clea is stable, but she has a long road ahead. There's significant damage to her leg, and she'll need extensive physical therapy. For now, she's being moved to recovery." Relief flooded Thomas, though it was tempered by the doctor's warning. He turned to Isabel, her tears flowing freely now, and nodded. "She's going to be okay." The family visited CLA in shifts, her hospital room becoming a hub of both worry and love. Sophie, still guarded, stood by the door during her first visit, her arms crossed. "Do you want to sit with her?" Isabel asked gently. Sophie hesitated before stepping closer to her sister's bed. CLA's pale face and the cast on her leg seemed to shake something loose in Sophie. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from CLA's forehead. "Hey," she whispered. "You scared us." Dwala stirred, her voice weak but determined. "Sorry." "Don't be stupid," Sophie muttered, though her voice cracked with emotion. "Just get better." Thomas watched from the corner, tears threatening as he saw the first glimpse of Sophie's protective love for her mother returning. In the weeks that followed, CLA's recovery became the family's central focus. Isabel threw herself into caregiving with a determination that surprised even Thomas. She attended every physical therapy session, encouraged CLA through painful exercises, and stayed up late at night to soothe her tears of frustration. One evening, as Isabel adjusted the pillows around Cleo, Sophie watched from the doorway. "You're really trying, aren't you?" Sophie said, her voice hesitant but lacking the anger it once held. Isabel looked up, startled. "I am," she replied softly. "I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to be here for you now." Sophie nodded, not quite smiling but not glaring either. "Good. She needs you." Meanwhile, Emma became an even greater source of support for Thomas. She checked in daily, often stopping by the hospital with meals or simply offering a listening ear. One evening, she found Thomas sitting alone in the hospital cafeteria, his head in his hands. "So, hey," she said, placing a cup of coffee in front of him. "You've been carrying this all on your own for too long." Thomas looked up, his exhaustion evident. "I'm trying to hold it together for them, but I feel like I'm failing." "You're not failing," Emma said firmly. "You're doing everything you can, and it's okay to lean on people. You don't have to do this alone." Her words stayed with him, a quiet reassurance that he clung to in the chaotic weeks ahead. The turning point came during a family dinner at the hospital, where Mrs. Thompson had brought one of her famous shepherd's pies. They crowded around Clay's hospital bed, laughing and sharing stories. For the first time in months, the atmosphere felt almost normal. CLA even managed a weak smile. "This is the best pie ever," she declared. In the report, "You just like it because you didn't have to help make it," Sophie teased, eliciting a round of laughter. Thomas caught Isabel's eye across the room, and for the first time he saw a glimmer of hope reflected back at him. Over the next few months, CLA's progress was slow but steady. Each step she took with her crutches became a victory celebrated by the entire family. The girls began to find their rhythm again, and Isabel's continued presence seemed to bridge some of the gaps left by her absence. Sophie started confiding in her mother about school. CLA leaned on her for emotional support during therapy. Anne began seeking Isabel out for bedtime stories. And Marie, ever the innocent optimist, declared one day, "We're all a team now." Thomas, watching his family come together, felt a cautious optimism. The road ahead would still be challenging, but for the first time, he believed they might just make it. With Emma's quiet support, Mrs. Thompson's wisdom, and Isabel's renewed commitment, the Durans were learning how to heal. One day, one step, and one moment of love at a time. The offer came on a crisp autumn morning, the kind that carried the promise of change in the air. Thomas sat across from his boss, Mr. Peterson, in the sleek, glass-walled office. "Thomas," Mr. Peterson began with a smile, "you've done exceptional work over the past few years. The company is expanding to Brighton, and we'd like you to lead the new team there." Thomas blinked, caught off guard. "Brighton?" "Yes," Mr. Peterson said. "It's a big opportunity. Higher pay, more responsibility, and a fresh start. We'll need your answer by next week." Thomas left the office that day with mixed emotions. Brighton promised a brighter future, but it also meant uprooting the fragile balance his family had worked so hard to achieve. The girls had just begun to heal, and Isabel was still earning back their trust. Would a move undo all their progress? That evening, Thomas gathered the family in the living room. The girls sat on the couch, curiosity etched on their faces. Isabel perched on a nearby chair, her expression cautious. "I have some news," Thomas began, glancing at each of them. "I've been offered a promotion, but it requires moving to Brighton." The room fell silent. Sophie, now 13, was the first to react. "No way," she said, crossing her arms. "I'm not leaving my school, or my friends." Anne looked worried. "Will I still get to see Mrs. Thompson?" she asked softly. Marie, ever optimistic, chimed in. "Does Brighton have ice cream, Daddy?" Mr. Weaver smiled at her. Stella, the quietest of the group, furrowed her brow. "It sounds like a big change," she said carefully. "What do you think, Dad?" Thomas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It is a big change. But it could also be a fresh start, a chance to build something new. I wouldn't even consider it without talking to all of you first." The days that followed were filled with family debates. Sophie was the most resistant, slamming doors and muttering about how unfair it was. CLA researched Brighton online, pointing out parks and schools that sounded promising. Anne clung to Thomas, worried about leaving the familiar. And Marie simply asked endless questions about their potential new home. Isabel, observing the tension, made a surprising suggestion one evening. "I could stay behind for a few months," she said, her voice steady. "You all could move first and settle in. That way I wouldn't disrupt things too much." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "You mean you'll leave again?" she snapped. "No, Sophie," Isabel replied gently. "I mean, I'll give you space. I know trust takes time. This way you can adjust at your own pace, and I'll join you when and if you're ready." Her words hung in the air, a mix of practicality and humility. For the first time, Sophie didn't lash out. Instead, she nodded, a small but significant gesture of understanding. By the time Thomas gave his answer to Mr. Peterson, the family had come to a tentative consensus. They would move to Brighton together, but Isabel would find a separate apartment nearby, allowing the girls time to adjust. The weeks leading up to the move were a whirlwind of packing, goodbyes, and bittersweet moments. Mrs. Thompson came over with baked goods nearly every day, promising to visit as soon as she could. Emma, ever supportive, helped Thomas organize logistics, offering her own warmth and encouragement. "Brighton sounds like a wonderful place to start fresh," Emma told him over coffee one evening. "And you'll make it feel like home, just like you've done here." Her words carried a deeper meaning, one that made Thomas's heart ache with gratitude and something more. The move itself was chaotic but hopeful. The girls were quiet as they arrived at their new house, taking in the unfamiliar neighborhood. The air smelled of salt from the nearby sea, and the faint sound of waves crashing carried on the wind. Marie was the first to break the silence. "It's pretty," she declared, pointing at the flower boxes on the windowsills. Her excitement brought smiles to the others' faces, and slowly the family began to explore their new home. Adjusting to life in Brighton came with its challenges. Sophie still resisted, often retreating to her room. But there were moments, like when she discovered the local volleyball team, that hinted at her softening. Clay thrived in the city's vibrant atmosphere, frequently biking along the waterfront. Anne found solace in an art club at her new school, while Marie charmed everyone with her endless curiosity. One weekend, Thomas suggested a family outing to the beach. Though hesitant at first, the girls soon found themselves laughing as they splashed in the waves and built sandcastles. Isabel joined them, her separate apartment close enough to stay involved. It was a small victory, a glimpse of the harmony they were rebuilding. Emma continued to be a steady presence in Thomas's life. She visited often, bringing small gifts for the girls and sharing quiet moments with Thomas after the chaos of the day. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Thomas turned to her, his voice tentative. "I don't know how I would have done this without you," he admitted. Emma smiled, her eyes warm. "You've done it, Thomas. I'm just here to remind you that you're not alone." Their connection deepened, though Thomas remained cautious. His focus was still on his daughters, and ensuring their transition to Brighton was as smooth as possible. The turning point came during a family dinner, one of the first that truly felt like home. They sat around the table, the scent of roasted chicken and freshly baked rolls filling the air. Sophie, to everyone's surprise, shared a story about her new school. Keila talked about a park she'd discovered, and Anne proudly displayed a drawing she'd made of their new house. Even Isabel, though still on the periphery, seemed at ease. She laughed at Mari's jokes and helped Anne cut her chicken, her maternal instincts shining through. As the evening wound down, Sophie glanced at Isabel. "You're really trying, aren't you?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I am," Isabel replied, meeting Sophie's gaze. "And I'll keep trying, for as long as it takes." Sophie nodded, a small but meaningful step toward reconciliation. Brighton, with its salty air and endless horizons, became a symbol of hope for the Durand family. They weren't perfect, and the scars of the past still lingered. But they were learning to navigate their new beginning, together. And as Thomas sat on the porch one quiet evening, watching his daughters laugh in the garden, he allowed himself to believe that, perhaps, they were finally on the path to healing. The faint sound of carols played on the radio as snowflakes began to drip softly outside the Durand family's home in Brighton. The warm glow of string lights wrapped around the house contrasted with the crisp winter air. Inside, the aroma of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and freshly baked cookies filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and chatter. Thomas stood in the kitchen, carving the turkey with practiced hands. His heart was full as he listened to the sounds of his daughters in the living room. Sophie, now 14, was helping CLA hang the last of the handmade ornaments on their Christmas tree. Anne sat on the floor, carefully arranging presents beneath it, while Marie danced around with her teddy bear, singing along to the carols. "It's perfect," Isabel said softly, standing in the doorway. She had offered to help, but Thomas had insisted she relax. Her eyes lingered on the scene, a bittersweet smile on her lips. "Perfect might be a stretch," Thomas joked lightly, glancing at her. "But it's ours." She nodded, her gaze shifting to the snow falling outside. "Thank you, Thomas, for giving me a chance to be here again." Thomas simply nodded, his heart too full to speak. The dining room glowed with the soft light of candles and a centerpiece of holly and pine cones. The family gathered around the table, their laughter bubbling as they passed plates of food and shared stories. "This is amazing, Dad," Marie exclaimed, her face lit up with delight. "Even better than last year." "Probably because I didn't burn anything this time," Thomas teased, earning a round of giggles from the girls. Soleil, who had grown stronger and more confident since her accident, raised her glass of sparkling cider. "To Dad," she said with a smile, "the best chef and the best dad in the world." Xavier. The toast was met with cheers, but Sophie's voice rose above the others. "And a mom," she added, glancing at Isabel, "for being here and trying." The room fell silent for a moment, all eyes turning to Sophie. Isabel's breath hitched, and tears shimmered in her eyes. "Sophie," Isabel said softly, her voice unsteady, I was really mad at you, Sophie admitted, her words careful but honest. For a long time. But I see how much you've tried. And I think I'm ready to forgive you. Isabel's tears spilled over as she rose from her seat, walking around the table to embrace her eldest daughter. Sophie stiffened for a moment before leaning into the hug. Thank you, Isabel whispered. That means everything to me. Thomas watched the scene unfold, his chest tight with emotion. It was a moment he had hoped for, but never dared to expect. After the meal, the family gathered in the living room by the crackling fire. Mrs. Thompson, who had joined them for the celebration, shared stories of Christmases past, her warm laughter filling the room. Emma arrived shortly after, carrying a homemade apple pie. The girls rushed to greet her, their affection for her evident in the way they hugged her tightly. Once everyone had settled, Thomas stood by the fireplace, clearing his throat. I have something I want to share, he began, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. He glanced at Emma, who smiled encouragingly. Over the past few years, we've been through so much, Thomas continued, looking at his daughters. We've lost, we've struggled, but we've also grown. And through it all, I've had the privilege of being your dad, of seeing how strong and amazing each of you are. The girls beamed at him, their love and pride evident. And now, he added, reaching for Emma's hand, I'm ready to take the next step in building a new chapter for our family. Emma and I are engaged. The room erupted into cheers. CLA and Anne jumped up to hug their father and Emma, while Marie squealed with delight. Even Sophie, who had been cautiously observing, broke into a smile. About time, Dad, she teased, earning laughter from everyone. Isabel, sitting quietly in the corner, raised her glass. To new beginnings, she said warmly, her eyes meeting Thomas's, and to a beautiful family. Thomas drew a deep breath to follow that honorable intention. As the evening wound down, the snow outside grew heavier, blanketing Brighton in a pristine white. The girls played board games by the fire, while the adults sipped mulled wine and exchanged quiet conversations. Isabel and Emma shared a rare moment of camaraderie, discussing everything from gardening to the girls' quirks. Thomas stepped outside onto the porch, taking a moment to himself. The crisp night air filled his lungs as he gazed at the falling snow. His mind wandered to the journey that had brought them here, the heartbreak, the struggles, the nights he had felt like giving up. But every step, every challenge, had led to this. He thought of Sophie's reconciliation with Isabel, of CLA's resilience after her accident, of Anne's newfound confidence, and of Marie's boundless joy. He thought of Emma, who had stood by him with unwavering support, and of Isabel, who had worked tirelessly to regain her place in their lives. The snowflakes sparkled under the porch light, each one unique, fleeting, yet part of something much larger, just like their family. Thomas smiled to himself, a sense of peace washing over him. He turned back toward the warm glow of the house, where laughter and love spilled out into the night. Whatever the future held, he knew they would face it together, stronger and more united than ever. As the clock struck midnight, officially welcoming Christmas Day, Thomas made a silent promise to nurture the love, gratitude, and forgiveness that had brought them to this moment, not just today, but every day. Because this was the true miracle of Christmas, a family forged not by perfection, but by resilience, hope, and unconditional love. As the snow continued to fall gently over their Brighton home, the Duran family settled into the warmth of their shared Christmas evening. The fire crackled softly, the room filled with the sound of laughter and the glow of connection, a perfect tableau of the journey they had taken together. As the family looked toward the future, they did so with renewed hope and unity. The drawing Marie had made years ago, a stick figure family smiling under the words, "Best Daddy in the World," had been framed and now hung in their living room. It stood as a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. Outside, the snow blanketed Brighton, a symbol of new beginnings and the clean slate they had fought to create. Inside, They were no longer just a group of people healing from loss. They were a family, whole in their imperfection, bound by a love that had been tested and proven true. As Thomas reflected on the past years, he knew their journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and more hard work. But he also knew, with unwavering certainty, that they would face it all together. Because family isn't about perfection. It's about resilience, forgiveness, and the small, everyday choices that weave the fabric of unconditional love. This was their story, a story of healing, of growth, and of a love strong enough to withstand the storms of life. And as the Christmas snow fell softly outside, it was also a story of hope for the future, shining as brightly as the tree lights in their living room.